Izuku Midoriya, a student at UA and known as one of the strongest individuals in the world, found himself questioning how he had agreed to this situation again. He had initially joined his friends, Ochako Uraraka and Tenya Ida, to help them update their costumes and check on a friend, Mei Hatsum. Mei had recently made significant advancements to her quirk following the sports festival. After Ochako and Tenya submitted their ideas, they were about to leave when Mei called out for their assistance. She excitedly explained that she had been developing a teleportation device that could potentially transport heroes to crime scenes in seconds. However, the device had been malfunctioning, sending items like fruits and metals in a disarray. Recently, after a breakthrough, she had successfully tested it with small insects and animals. Now, the final test was to teleport a human, and Izuku, with his resilience and ability to teleport, was the ideal candidate. Initially, Aizawa and Power Loader were hesitant, but after Izuku agreed and demonstrated his confidence, they allowed the test to proceed under their supervision. Despite this, Izuku felt a twinge of doubt as he noticed everyone else was safely behind protective barriers. Alucard, the spirit of the dark fruit, reassured him, and Izuku nodded in acknowledgement. Mei, with the help of Power Loader, made final adjustments while Ochako and Tenya waited anxiously nearby. Once everything was ready, Mei spoke into the microphone, asking Izuku if he was prepared. He nodded, and with a mix of excitement and nerves, she activated the device. As the energy enveloped Izuku, he felt a strange sensation lifting him into the air. Mei cheered from the control room, excited at the prospect of success. However, things took a turn for the worse when error messages flooded the screens, and the energy around Izuku became chaotic. He attempted to activate his quirk to escape but found himself unable to do so. Panic ensued among his friends as they urged Aizawa to intervene. However, Power Loader explained that safety protocols prevented them from entering the testing area during a malfunction. Aizawa, with a look of frustration, silenced their protests. After a tense few minutes, the chaos subsided, and the protective barriers were lowered, revealing only a crater where the testing room had been. Aizawa quickly contacted Present Mic to check on Izuku, but the response was disheartening. Mei, overwhelmed with guilt, began to mumble anxiously while typing furiously at her computer. Ochako, desperate for answers, confronted Mei, demanding to know Izuku's whereabouts. Mei, in tears, admitted she didn't know but vowed to find him. Ochako, feeling a mix of shock and determination, silently left the lab, her thoughts consumed with concern for Izuku's safety. Meanwhile, Izuku found himself in an unfamiliar place, engulfed in light and disoriented by a loud roar. As the disorientation faded, he realized he was standing on solid ground but still unable to see or hear clearly. Using his haki, he scanned the area and sensed human life nearby, but they felt weaker than he expected, raising his concern about where he had ended up. As Izuku Midoriya began to regain his sight and hearing, he was startled by the sound of screaming. True to his heroic nature, he rushed toward the source of the commotion. Upon arrival, he was met with a troubling scene, a woman on the ground and two men towering over her, their strength evident. Without hesitation, Izuku activated his sparkle fruit, encasing his arm in diamonds, and charged at the larger man, sending him crashing into a wall. The shorter man, taken by surprise, shouted in confusion just before Izuku delivered a powerful kick, sending him flying into a nearby truck. Ignoring the gasps from onlookers, Izuku turned to the woman and offered her his hand. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Why yeah, I'm fine," she replied, taking his hand to stand up. As Izuku's vision cleared, he recognized her features, which seemed familiar. Suddenly, a groan came from the truck. "Why didn't anyone tell me Ivy's made friends with a wall of muscle?" a man grumbled as he emerged, followed by the larger man who simply grunted in response. Izuku was shocked to see Batman and Nightwing, recalling memories of the spirits who knew them. He processed Nightwing's words and realized the woman must be Poison Ivy. "It doesn't matter," Batman said, pulling out 3 batarangs. "All it means is there will be one new face in Arkham tonight." Although he felt a twinge of regret for involving someone so young, he was resolute. Nightwing smirked, ready for action. Works for me, he said, charging at Izuku. Wait, we don't need to, Izuku started, but Nightwing quickly closed the distance and struck him. And good night, he said, activating the electric feature of his weapon. However, nothing happened. Nightwing's eyes widened in disbelief. Why isn't it working? Batman shouted for him to take cover as he launched batarangs into the air. Izuku, aware of the civilians behind him, used his swamp fruit to absorb the danger. Okay, now what? Nightwing asked, confused as their efforts seemed futile. Suddenly, the batarangs exploded, creating a thick cloud of smoke that enveloped Izuku. The crowd scattered in fear. Well, that's one of them down. Now we just have to find Ivy, Nightwing said, noticing she had slipped away. Just as he was about to move, Batman raised his arm, signaling him to wait. What's wrong now? Nightwing asked, annoyed, only for the smoke to clear and reveal Izuku standing unharmed. Oh, that's what, Batman remarked, surprised. Izuku shrugged, yeah, explosions don't really work on me. Now can we please just talk about this? Before he could finish, Batman launched himself at him with a kick. Izuku caught Batman's leg and threw him toward Nightwing, who was caught off guard and fell under the weight. Geez, how much equipment are you carrying? Nightwing groaned, accepting Batman's hand to get up. Thanks, now let's get this kid, he said, both heroes charging at Izuku, only to hit an invisible barrier created by Izuku's barrier fruit. Well, that came out of nowhere, Nightwing muttered, rubbing his head as he and Batman tried to break through the barrier without success. This isn't working, any ideas? Nightwing asked. Batman nodded and pressed a button on his utility belt. A roaring engine echoed as an armored vehicle sped toward Izuku. With a scowl, Izuku cancelled the barrier and extended his hand, purple. Lightning crackling from it. Repel, he thought, sending the vehicle flying back, but horror struck him as he realized it was headed toward an oil truck. No, he shouted, but it was too late. The collision resulted in a massive explosion, flames engulfing the street as people ran for safety. Batman and Nightwing rushed toward the fire to assist anyone in need. Just as Izuku was about to join them, a voice echoed in his mind, urging him to leave. Those two can handle it. Right now, we need to focus on getting away, the voice insisted. Izuku hesitated until he felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Poison Ivy. Yeah, we need to go now, she said, grabbing his hand and leading him down an abandoned alleyway, unaware that the entire scene had been captured on film. Well, the fire's finally out, Nightwing, otherwise known as D. Grayson, said to his mentor, Batman, also known as Bruce Wayne. Bruce nodded with a grunt as he began to examine the area where they had fought, trying to find any clues about the boy. Noticing Bruce's focus, D. pulled out his phone. I keep telling you to check out the villain websites, he remarked while browsing some of the more popular ones. Hey, our fight has already been posted. He watched the video before frowning. Do I really sound that cheesy? He asked as Batman stood up, putting something into a test tube. Got something? D. inquired, prompting Bruce to nod and show him a beaker containing a green hair before handing it to his former sidekick. Take this back to the cave and start analyzing it. We need to know who we're dealing with, Batman instructed, his signature scowl even more pronounced. Gotham was already overwhelmed with crime, the last thing the city needed was a new metahuman causing trouble. And you? Grayson asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm going to see if anyone knows anything about this kid. If there's a new supervillain in town, someone has to have heard about him, Batman replied before calling the Batjet and taking off. D. shook his head as he headed toward his motorcycle. That guy really needs to check the websites, he thought. Out of all the places Poison Ivy could have taken us, a penthouse was not one of them, the Red Death commented as they surveyed the area. Though she might have lost her green thumb, he continued, noting that every plant in the place looked shriveled and dead. So what exactly happened here? Izuku asked, receiving a growl from Ivy, her eyes burning with fury. Black Mask happened. He detonated a super weed killer bomb, destroying every plant here. I was ready to take down his operation when Batman and Nightwing showed up. You know the story from there. She let out another growl before sighing deeply, a look of sadness washing over her. My poor babies, she whispered, stroking one of the dead vines. Despite her villainous nature, Izuku felt genuinely sorry for her and wished there was something he could do. Oh, there is, Izuku my boy, there is, a deep, gurgling voice echoed, causing Izuku's eyes to widen as he realized what the spirit was referring to. That's right, with your power, I can fix this, he thought. Nurgle, the chaos god and spirit of the Nurgle fruit, let out another wheezing laugh. That's right, my boy. Death and rebirth is what I stand for, and here is no exception. So let's help continue this cycle of life, the chaos god said as Izuku's hand took on a sickly green color as he touched one of the roots. Ivy noticed this, but before she could say anything, her eyes widened and her mouth dropped as she saw every plant in the penthouse not only return to life but grow stronger and healthier than they ever were before. How did I live? Ivy was interrupted by a cry from a talking plant. Oh Ivy, it was horrible. I thought I was headed for that great garden in the sky, the plant exclaimed, hugging her tightly, which she awkwardly returned. Yeah, Frank. It's good to see you're alive, she reassured him with a smile before her expression turned serious as she looked at Izuku. But first, I think we need to get some answers out of our friend here. She said this not with disdain, but with caution, finding it hard to believe someone would willingly help her for no reason. Ivy, are you out of your mind? Our friend here just saved me and every other plant. And you repay him with distrust? Frank exclaimed, turning to Izuku. I am so sorry about her. No matter how much I try, she just can't help being a bit difficult sometimes, Frank explained, ignoring Ivy's raised eyebrow. Izuku waved it off. Don't worry about it, Frank. I would be suspicious too if I were her, he said before turning to Ivy. I can explain, but it'll take a while. There's a lot to cover for you to fully understand. Ivy shrugged. I've got nothing better to do now that all my plants are alive again, she replied, sitting down on her sofa and gesturing to the chair next to her. Sit, she instructed, and Izuku complied while Frank sat beside Ivy, eager to hear the story. Seeing that he had both their attention, Izuku began, well, it all started in Qing, China. To be continued. The rift is a split in the barrier that separates different worlds and prevents them from colliding. Normally, when one crosses into an alternative version of their world, no rift appears due to the small distance between them. However, beyond that distance, the chance of a rift appearing increases significantly, as does the risk of the worlds colliding because of how unstable it is. Quite frankly, the fact that nothing happened the first time astounds me, Darkseid explained. Izuku let out a sigh of frustration, thinking, so basically, we need to find a way to locate my exact world and a stable way to get there. The spirits confirmed his thoughts. At that moment, Frank approached Izuku. Still talking to the ghost in your head, Izuku? The plant asked, amused. Izuku nodded, and Frank continued, you know, I think this is the first time Ivy's acted like this in a long time. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are only a few people she behaves this way around. He revealed, raising an eyebrow at the young boy. What I'm trying to say is that I care about Ivy. I might joke about her all day, but she's very important to me. So please, keep being a positive influence on her. The girl needs all the friends she can get. Izuku nodded in agreement. After some more research, Izuku headed to the guest room to get some sleep after a long and stressful day. A couple of days had passed since Izuku arrived in this world, and he had gained a fair understanding of it. However, Ivy surprised him by telling him to get changed because they were heading out. This surprised Izuku since they had spent the last 2 days in the penthouse. After changing into some clothes, he and Ivy hit the town, only to find themselves in front of a bar. So, what are we doing here? Izuku asked, raising an eyebrow. Nothing really, I just thought you could use a break. And what better way than over a drink, she said, ignoring his age. It was only when she entered the bar that she realized how questionable the idea was. Ivy, a voice shouted, and a second later, a blur slammed into her, spinning her around before stopping just in front of Izuku, who had entered the bar unnoticed. Hello, Harley, Ivy said, her voice strained as Izuku recognized the woman responsible for the commotion. So she's this world's version of Harley Quinn, he thought as the clown woman began talking Ivy's ear off, and Ivy looked like she was struggling to keep her composure. Come on, Ivy, a whole bunch of us have a big table over there, Harley said, trying to drag Ivy with her. Actually, Harles, I'm here with someone, Ivy tried to say, only to be interrupted. Wait, you actually got a date, Ivy? Harley exclaimed, shocked. Well, they can come along too, she said, looking around until her eyes landed on Izuku, and they widened. It's you, she whispered before rushing over to Izuku, her face inches from his own. You're the guy who saved Ivy, she shouted, drawing the attention of those around them. She grabbed his hand and began dragging him along. Come on, I'll introduce you to some people who have been dying to meet you, she said, while Izuku looked to Ivy for help, who could only shrug and follow. Harley led them to the back, where a large circular table was occupied by 4 people, and Izuku's eyes widened as he recognized them. I never thought I'd meet you here, my boy. Oswald Cobblepot, otherwise known as the Penguin. A pleasure, he introduced, extending his hand, which Izuku shook. Izuku Midoriya, same, he replied, receiving a nod from the man. I must say, it was impressive the way you dealt with the bat and one of his little birds, the man continued, his voice shifting from light to deep and rough as he shook Izuku's hand. Harvey Dent, otherwise known as Two-Face, he finished. Suddenly, Izuku found an arm across his shoulder as he came face to face with the clown. Impressive doesn't do it justice. The look on the bat's face right before he collided with the wall will always be a cherished memory of mine, and the way you sent his little sidekick flying, he laughed, gripping his stomach. Priceless. Then he straightened up. Joker, clown prince of crime at your service, he said, reaching out to shake Izuku's hand, only to JRK back at the shock. All eyes turned to Izuku, who sheepishly raised his hand, which had a small amount of electricity on it. Sorry about that, but your little joy buzzer trick is well known. I thought it'd be funny to turn the tables for a change, he explained, glancing at the Joker to see his reaction. The clown was silent for a moment before shaking with laughter. Shock humor. Finally, someone with a sense of humor, he exclaimed, gesturing to Harley. That's my assistant, Harley Quinn, he introduced casually, earning an annoyed look from the clown girl. I'm his partner. And former girlfriend. Harley yelled, only to receive a shrug and a smirk from the Joker. Before any further argument could break out, the other woman spoke up. Anyway, I'm Selina Kyle, or Catwoman. Welcome to Gotham, hun, she introduced herself with a wink toward Izuku, who nodded back as he, Ivy, and Harley took their seats. Soon, all 7 had drinks, even Izuku, whose protests were ignored when Penguin bought the next round for the table. So, Midoriya, why have you decided to come to Gotham of all places? Harvey asked. If you're trying to get into the business of making a dishonest dollar, there are easier places to start, the former district attorney stated. Izuku simply shrugged. Everyone starts somewhere. I figured Gotham was as good a place as any, he replied, with Ivy giving a subtle nod. They had agreed that Izuku should keep things vague if questioned by villains. However, to Izuku's dismay, Penguin smirked with interest. Is that so? Well then, how would you feel about helping me with a little job I've been planning, he asked, and Izuku felt a sense of dread. And what would this job be exactly, he inquired, noticing Penguin's smirk grow wider. Why, to rob Gotham's merchant bank, Penguin said, prompting a sigh from Izuku. He had anticipated being asked to help with a heist. Pamela had warned him that because he had helped her and fought against Batman, people would assume he was trying to become a villain. Still, he was uncertain about going through with it. He was trying to become a hero. Was he really going to throw all of that away? You are already in a pretty much hopeless situation, the least you can do is try and make something of it. Unless you plan to mooch off Ivy for the rest of the time you are here, Fury snapped irritably. Izuku gritted his teeth at the thought. Fury speaks the truth, we cannot sit around and do nothing. Besides, as frustrating as it is, there is no point in going to the heroes for this. Even if you convince them what you are saying is true, none of them will risk the multiverse just to send a single person back. A criminal, on the other hand, would be crazy or smart enough to try for the right amount of money. With the powers you have, it should be easy enough to get millions, if not billions, of dollars for it, the killing machine advised. Izuku clenched his fist, realizing he had to accept it. Fine, I'll do what I have to, he thought before looking at Penguin, who was waiting patiently. What would my cut be? If he was going to be a criminal, he wanted to make sure it was worth it. Penguin laughed. The boy wants to get his money's worth. I like it, he said before looking at Izuku. Your cut is whatever you can carry. Is that enough for you, my boy? He asked, and Izuku nodded. I have to say, I am surprised to see you all acting so civil with each other, you know, being business rivals and all, he remarked, earning amused looks from the criminals. Just because we are business rivals doesn't mean we can't be civil outside business hours, Joker laughed. Besides, we have to be careful these days, especially with that little merger between Carmine Falcone, the ventriloquist, Great White Shark, and Black Mask, Two-Face added, noticing the dark scowl on Poison Ivy's face at the mention of Black Mask. Those four actually teamed up? Izuku questioned, raising an eyebrow. What can we say, hun? B-listers can't hack it alone, Catwoman said, resting her head in her hands, causing Izuku to cough and turn away, which made them all laugh. They spent the rest of the night chatting, laughing, and exchanging rumors. Around 11 p.m., they left the bar. Alright, Izuku, come to the Iceberg Lounge tomorrow at noon. If you're late, you're out, got it? Penguin instructed, and Izuku nodded, receiving a grin from Oswald in return before heading back to the lounge. Joker, Harley, Harvey, and Selina all said their goodbyes, though Selina shot Izuku a wink before leaping off toward the roof. Izuku wasted no time and used the Dordor fruit to get himself and Ivy back to her apartment instantly. Well, that was quite the experience, Ivy said, looking exhausted from interacting with people for so long. Oh, now that sounds like there's more to it than that. So, what else happened, Ivy? Frank asked, letting out a sigh. Izuku agreed to help Penguin with a bank robbery tomorrow, Pamela revealed, and Frank let out a sound of excitement. Oh, your first job. They grow up so fast. I'm about to cry, he exclaimed as he quickly ran to grab tissues. Ignoring the crying plant, why did you agree to do this? Ivy asked, and Izuku sighed before explaining the problem and why he decided to help Penguin. By the end of it, Ivy understood. She didn't like it, but she understood. Look, you do whatever you feel you need to do. Just try not to lose sight of why you're doing it, okay? She said, concerned. Izuku nodded before heading to bed to prepare for the next day. Hey, Izuku, Ivy suddenly called out, causing him to turn. He was surprised to see Ivy standing there with a small smile. Whatever happens, just remember you're always welcome here, she said, stunning Izuku for a moment before a small smile appeared on his face. He nodded and headed toward his room. It was near noon when Izuku arrived at the Iceberg Lounge. He was met by a guard at the front door, but Penguin had texted him the password that morning, so he got through with little issue. Walking inside, the place was truly incredible. Fancy decor adorned the space, and in the center, a real iceberg floated in a pool of water behind a stage, likely used for performances. Penguin spotted him and went to greet him. Ah, Izuku, glad to see you could make it, he said, shaking his hand. Glad to be here, Mr. Cobblepot, Izuku replied. Please, to my men, it's Mr. Cobblepot, to my friends, it's Oswald, he informed, receiving a nod from Izuku before leading him over to discuss the plan. To Izuku's relief, the plan was straightforward and ensured no civilian casualties. A man would be on the roof, and when the signal was given, they would throw a canister of sleeping gas into the ventilation system, knocking out all citizens and security. Meanwhile, a hacker would disable all security systems for 5 minutes, allowing the rest of the crew consisting of about 8 others to rush in with gas masks and access the multiple vaults in the bank. Izuku, immune to all gases thanks to the gas fruit, would not need a mask. 2 vans waited outside, Izuku would ride in one, while Oswald took the other. The ride was silent as Izuku prepared for the job, reassured by the spirits that it had to be done. Upon arriving in the parking lot and receiving the go-ahead from the hacker, they rushed in. Izuku's frown turned into a scowl at the sight of the downed people, the urge to help screaming inside him, but he pushed those feelings down as he approached an unattended vault. With the help of multiple strength enhancers, he forced it open and got to work. A hatch on his hand released 10 burlap sacks, which he tossed into the air, his hands blooming thanks to the flower fruit. Things seem to be going well over here, a pleased voice said. Izuku looked over to see Oswald approaching, his face hidden by a gas mask. Oswald nodded at the apparent success. I'd say you've got a couple $1 million here, he remarked, his tone satisfied. Izuku nodded in response until his haki sensed a large group of people gathering outside. We need to leave now, Izuku advised, noticing the look of confusion on Penguin's masked face. I have a sensing ability, and right now, I'm sensing a lot of people gathering outside. It could be the police. Penguin understood and ran toward the entrance as Izuku grabbed the money and followed him. DMN it. The boy's right. Penguin exclaimed, contemplating their next move. If we make it to the vans, will you be able to get away? Izuku asked, and Penguin nodded. All right then, I have a plan. Sir, with all due respect, I don't think all this is necessary, Sergeant Johnson said, looking toward Police Commissioner James Gordon. Gordon's head snapped toward the sergeant. Not necessary, he whispered, slowly approaching him. Tell me, Sergeant, when is any amount of cops not necessary when dealing with these criminals? Is it when they're blowing up a building or taking the mayor hostage? You've been here for a couple of months. Take it from someone who's been here for years, this is necessary. Understand? The sergeant nodded shakily. Good, glad we could have this little talk, Gordon said with a smile before returning to the front. At that moment, Izuku, Oswald, and the rest of the crew exited through the front door. Penguin. I should have known it was you. How else would you rob this bank? Gordon yelled, his face deep in thought as he continued to speak. Well, besides Joker, Two-Face, Black Mask, the Great White Shark. He rattled off names, never noticing Izuku smirking as he watched 2 black vans drive off. Worked like a charm. Izuku's plan was simple. He would use the split fruit to create several clones and, using the clone fruit, transfer 9 of them to Oswald and the other gang members to distract the cops while the rest led the others out through the side of the building silently and invisibly using the through fruit, clam fruit, and clear fruit. Izuku was shaken from his thoughts by the roar of an engine, cutting off Gordon's growing list as everyone looked up to see the Batwing. Seconds later, Batman and Nightwing dropped down, but before either could speak, Izuku raised a hand. I'm not really in the mood to fight today, he said, bending down to pick up 2 cement bricks. So you'll just have to settle for this. Using one of the gold fruit's awakened abilities, he turned the bricks to gold. Before anyone could react, Izuku tossed the 2 bricks at the heroes, who were about to dodge when suddenly the gold expanded into giant puddles, encasing them from their shoulders down. The 2 heroes dropped to the ground, scowling as they struggled to free themselves while Gordon yelled, "Open fire." His men complied, but Izuku shook his head and snapped his fingers, causing the clones to explode into smoke, blocking everyone's view of him as his outline slowly faded. Izuku calmly walked down an abandoned alley a few miles away from the bank. He had just received a text from Oswald, telling him they had all made it back to the lounge and to come around later to celebrate. Izuku assured Penguin he would before deciding to head back to Ivy's to see what she wanted for lunch. He preferred walking back instead of teleporting. Suddenly, he stopped, growling as he sensed around 40 men surrounding him, hiding just out of sight. "I'm really not in the mood to deal with this," he muttered before taking a deep breath and closing his eyes. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open as intense pressure filled the area, smashing into the sides of the surrounding buildings, red lights strkng off him. As he began to walk, the sound of people collapsing filled the area until he stopped in front of an alley, reaching in, grabbing something, and throwing it against the wall. It turned out that the individual was a barely conscious thug who was now feeling the full effect of Izuku's conqueror's haki. "Who are you, and what do you want?" Izuku demanded, noticing the man shaking too much to respond. "Answer me," he growled, causing the thug to stutter. I work for Black Mask. You know how he joined forces with a couple of other crime lords, right?" Izuku nodded. "Well, they want to talk to you. They said to get you to them by any means necessary." Izuku nodded again, then grabbed the man by the scruff of his shirt and brought him up to eye level. "I hate to tell you this, but I'm not really interested in seeing them. Tell them if they want to chat, they can come to me. Understand?" The thug nodded, and Izuku dropped him. The man wasted no time scrambling to his feet and running away. With that taken care of and his mood officially soured, Izuku decided to use the Dordor fruit to return to Ivy's, where he could share the news about the job and this new development. "How long has he been at it?" Grayson asked a well-dressed older man as they watched Bruce Wayne type furiously on the back computer, only to growl in frustration now and then. "Ever since I managed to get you two out of that gold, Master D. Alfred Pennyworth, Bruce's butler, replied with a tired sigh, shaking his head. He had grown accustomed to this type of situation over the years. Can you really blame him? Both times we've encountered this kid, he's pretty much outmatched us, Deet said, crossing his arms with a frustrated expression as he thought about their past encounters. Alfred, noticing D's concern, tried to reason with Bruce. "Master Bruce, maybe it's time you take a break. It's been 2 days since that bank robbery, and you haven't slept." Bruce only scowled deeper, letting out a grunt. Ever since this kid appeared, he had been dealing with a persistent headache. Initially, Bruce thought the kid was just a punk trying to make a name for himself in Gotham's underground. However, his perspective shifted when he realized the kid might be a victim of Poison Ivy, brainwashed into doing her bidding. That theory changed when the kid participated in a bank robbery with the Penguin, indicating he was fully aware of his actions. What troubled Bruce further was the range of powers the kid seemed to possess. He could turn into diamonds, transform into muck, manipulate magnetism, and even turn things into gold. As far as Batman knew, most individuals with multiple powers had a central theme or base for their abilities, but this kid appeared to have no limits. Lost in thought, Bruce was reminded of the source of his headache. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find any information about this kid. There were no dental records, no birth certificates, no school records, even the hair he collected yielded no matches worldwide. D broke the silence. "Alfred's right, you know. You really need to get some rest. I can handle anything that comes up while you take a break." Nightwing reassured him, but Bruce let out another grunt. "I'm not taking a break until I find anything about this kid." Nightwing hummed thoughtfully. "So, you're saying that if you find anything about him, you'll listen to Alfred and actually try to rest?" Bruce sighed tiredly. At this point, yes. He turned back to his work, only for the screen to shut off unexpectedly. He turned to see a smirking Nightwing holding his phone, with Alfred trying to hide his smile while holding a remote. Bruce raised an eyebrow. "I take it you've got something," he stated as DS' smirk widened. He tossed the phone to Bruce, who caught it and watched the news report displayed. New super criminal Izuku Midoriya. 2 days ago, a bank robbery was executed by the Penguin, and despite the GCPD, Batman, and Nightwing being present, the diminutive crime lord managed to escape with millions. When we later caught up with him, he had this to say: "It was all thanks to my new friend Izuku Midoriya, an up-and-coming crime lord who's here to make his mark." When asked why he thought Midoriya was trying to become a crime lord, he simply laughed. The first thing he did was defend Ms. Isley and fought against the Bat. It was obvious he was trying to make a statement: "I am here, and I am to be feared." When asked about young Izuku's plans for the future, he replied he had no knowledge but hoped the young man would be available to help him again in the future. As the video ended and Batman set the phone down, he noticed his former sidekick and Alfred looking at him expectantly, prompting a sigh from him. "Fine," he relented, causing their grins to widen. "But don't expect me to like it." Nightwing chuckled. "Believe me, we never did," he called out as Batman rode the elevator up to the mansion while Nightwing turned on the monitor again, waiting for a crime alert. Deep in the industrial district, among rows of abandoned factories, smoke billowed from a few scattered buildings. These factories were responsible for supplying guns, drags, and various other products not only to Gotham but to other cities as well. They were owned by Black Mask, as part of his criminal empire. The man in question was not happy at the moment, and it was all due to a single reason. Roman Siones, known as Black Mask, slammed his fist onto his desk in frustration, causing it to splinter and sending dust flying onto his pristine white suit. He glared at the news broadcast covering a recent bank robbery, seething with anger. "I can't believe it. I've been active for years and I'm still considered a B-lister, while this newcomer gets all the attention after just one robbery. It's ridiculous." He paced around his office, his irritation palpable. "Calm down, Mask. Throwing a fit won't solve anything," Warren White, also known as the Great White Shark, advised. His appearance was striking, with pale skin and noticeable deformities. "What do you propose we do?" "Let this new guy take over," he pressed, receiving only a sneer from Black Mask in return. "Of course not. We need to think rationally and regain the upper hand," he insisted, raising an eyebrow at Black Mask's skepticism. "And how do we do that?" Black Mask asked. "Simple, my friend," a new voice chimed in, drawing their attention to an older man with glasses holding a puppet dressed as a 1920s gangster. This was Scarface and the ventriloquist. "We take something he cares about," the puppet revealed, showing them a picture of Poison Ivy. "Abduction and blackmail, I like it," Shark agreed. "The only question is how to do it without alerting her friends." Black Mask responded confidently, "Don't worry, I know just the guys." Meanwhile, at the Iceberg Lounge, Two-Face turned to Izuku, who was deep in thought. "So, what's your plan now, kid? Are you staying in Gotham or going through with your travel plans?" Izuku had been contemplating traveling across the country to learn about other heroes, a cover for his true intention of finding a way back home. "Honestly, I'm leaving tomorrow," he revealed, surprising the former district attorney. "I just helped out with a major bank robbery and made a fool of the Bat. Figured getting out of town for a bit is best," he explained, earning a nod from Dent. "That's a solid plan, especially with the amount you collected during our outing, over 5 million, if I recall correctly," the Penguin chimed in, having just arrived from his office. "I know it's sudden, but I think it's for the best," Izuku said, receiving agreement from the two men. "Well, if that's the case, let's enjoy ourselves. I hear Ms. Quinn is having a girls' night with Ms. Isley tonight, so we're the best company you've got," Penguin chuckled. A thought struck Izuku. "Are you sure the money is safe with this manager of yours? This calculator guy, can he really be trusted?" he asked, recalling his brief conversation with the man. Both men nodded in reassurance. "Yes, he may seem sketchy, but he's a professional and keeps his word," Two-Face assured him. The three men spent the rest of the day talking and enjoying drinks, although Izuku opted for just a glass, as he couldn't get drunk. Later, after closing time, Izuku used an air door to reach Ivy's floor outside her apartment. He hesitated to teleport inside, recalling how it had startled Ivy before. As he unlocked the door, he called out, "Hey, Ivy, you back yet?" Suddenly, a loud click was followed by an explosion. Poison Ivy groaned as she slowly regained consciousness, her surroundings coming into focus. She found herself in a large metal room, strapped to a chair with only a door nearby. What happened, she wondered, rubbing her head as memories flooded back. Flashback. DMN it, how did I let Harley talk me into that bar crawl? I should be immune to alcohol poisoning, I'm Poison Ivy, she muttered, shaking her head as she walked home. I wonder what Izuku's been up to, it's his last night here, she thought, feeling a pang of sadness at his impending departure. He was one of the few she could truly rely on. As she neared her apartment, a figure stepped in front of her. Well, what do we have here? None other than Little Miss Mother Nature herself, he said, approaching her. Ivy raised an eyebrow, unfazed. And you are, she asked, only to provoke his anger. Who am I? I am the fear of man. I am the electrocutioner, he roared. Ivy stared at the man before recognition dawned on her. Oh, I think I've heard about you before, she said, a smirk forming on her lips. Aren't you the guy who got knocked out by Batman before being thrown out of a building? How did you survive that? I survived because I am strong, he replied, avoiding the question. Never mind that. You will come with me now. Black Mask wishes to see you. The mention of Black Mask made Ivy scowl. Yeah, I'm not going to see him after what he did to my plants. If he wants to talk to me, he can come to me and beg, she said with a feigned smile before turning to walk away. Just then, she ducked as an electrified fist smashed into the side of the building. I meant now, Ivy, he grunted, electricity sparking from his hands. Ivy scowled in annoyance, but then noticed some weeds growing nearby. With a smirk, she raised her hands, causing giant roots to emerge from the ground and entangled a would-be kidnapper, leaving him unable to escape. Wow, first you fail as an assassin, and now as a kidnapper. Can't seem to find the right job, can you? She mocked as she began to walk away. Suddenly, Ivy gasped in pain as a burning sensation coursed through her body. Oh, I don't know about that. I'd say he makes a great distraction, a voice said from behind her, causing her to turn in panic. Deathstroke. Good night, Ms. Isley, he said simply, striking her on the head and sending her to the floor, unconscious. When Ivy regained consciousness, she muttered to herself about Slade, the one who had knocked her out. Just then, the door to her room opened, and Black Mask entered, accompanied by Deathstroke and Electrocutioner. That he did, and I apologize for the rough treatment, but the matter we need to discuss is urgent, Black Mask said, though he didn't sound very apologetic. Ivy was about to retort when she noticed Electrocutioner. Your name's Buczynski. What's your first name? Chuck, she asked, provoking the assassin. It's Lester, he roared, earning an eye roll from Ivy. Yeah, because that's so much better, she muttered before turning back to Black Mask. So what is this all about? Last time I checked, I had a score to settle with you, she said, glaring at him. Well, Ivy, you happen to know a certain rising star in our line of work. We sent out a few associates to collect him for a discussion, but he seemed determined to have us come to him, Black Mask explained, his voice light but laced with hidden anger. Then an idea came to me. If we couldn't get him here on his own, what if we gave him a reason to come? The question was, what could we take that he would care enough to come for? Ivy realized why she was there. You're using me as bait, she exclaimed, struggling against her binds to avoid the humiliation of being a damsel in distress. That would be correct, Pamela. This is part of Plan B, Roman admitted, raising eyebrows from the others in the room. And Plan A is what exactly? Slade asked, arms crossed, having never been informed of this. Soon, my friends, soon. It's almost showtime, Black Mask promised, leaving them confused. Just then, a cameraman entered, pushing a TV. Before you begin whatever you're about to start, mind telling us why you're doing this? It can't just be because of the attention Izuku is getting, Ivy requested, prompting a chuckle from Roman. Hate to say it, but you're right. This isn't about that little brat getting media attention, Black Mask admitted. You know who tipped off the police during the bank robbery? That was me. He revealed. It should have been perfect. Everyone knows how chaotic things have gotten, and it was a firefight waiting to happen. For Penguin, it meant that enough police would be taken out, ensuring he couldn't bribe his way out of jail. As for the commissioner, he'd be too busy tracking down the A-listers, while my new business partners and I could run our empire from the sidelines, he said with a grin before his expression darkened. But then that little brat came along, and everything fell apart. Not only did no one die, but the way he helped Penguin escape and easily defeated Batman boosted his ratings while increasing Penguin's as well, he yelled, taking a few deep breaths to calm himself. But enough about the past, he said as the cameraman pointed the camera at him and the TV turned on. It's showtime. And we're live in 3, 2, 1, go, the cameraman indicated. Black Mask appeared on the screen. Good evening, Gotham. Roman Sionis here. I apologize for interrupting your sports game, cooking show, or whatever else you were watching, but I have a matter to discuss with every man, woman, and child that simply could not wait. He greeted the audience as he was broadcast live to every TV, phone, and computer in Gotham, the citizens watching in anticipation and fear of what was coming next. As many of you are probably aware, a few days ago marked the debut of a new figure in Gotham, a so-called super criminal. He decided to assist our dear guest, Pamela Isley. He saved her from Batman and his sidekick. Now, you might be wondering why I am doing this in the first place. Well, it's simple. A few days ago, I was presented with the opportunity to eliminate some competition, and I can say without a doubt it would have worked had this new guy not intervened. At the Iceberg Lounge, Penguin narrowed his eyes in anger as he watched the broadcast, realizing exactly what Sionis was referring to. It all made sense now. He had been trying to figure out how the cops knew about his operation at the bank. Naturally, after something like that, my business partners, who Ivy recently joined, were quite displeased with this turn of events. We sent a few of our men to pick me up for a discussion. Unfortunately, he refused, and now we have to resort to other methods. He explained, walking over to the TV. To Ivy's shock, it showed the inside of her building, revealing her apartment filled with oil drums and explosives linked to her front door. And this, dear viewers, is the lesson of this broadcast, Black Mask stated as he approached the door, unlocking and opening it. Boom. Don't mess with the Black Mask, he declared as the entire city watched the apartment explode in a massive fireball. Ivy glared at him, but then a smirk appeared on her face as she chuckled slightly. Mind sharing what's so funny? Deathstroke asked with a raised eyebrow. Just keep watching, and you'll see, she replied, and to everyone's surprise, Izuku, who had been blasted into the wall by the door, was getting up after pushing it off without a scratch, clearly angry. Yeah, Ivy said, smirking. Explosions don't really work on him. Ivy glared furiously as Izuku looked around, his hockey fully activated as he tried to sense Ivy but found nothing. Dumbass. Why didn't you have your hockey active? He scolded himself, knowing well what the criminals of Gotham were capable of. He was pulled from his thoughts when his phone rang. It was Harley. Look, Harley, now is really not a good time, he answered quickly. It was Black Mask, she shouted, causing Izuku's eyes to widen. What did you just say? He asked, surprised. He's broadcasting right now. He just showed the apartment blowing up with tons of hidden cameras, Harley revealed. Izuku scanned the apartment using the glare fruit to find the hidden cameras while ignoring the fire around him. Eventually, he found them and used his magnetic devil fruit to crush them into scraps, leaving only static. The four criminals watching from the holding cell fell silent before Ivy smirked. "Looks like you needed a plan B after all," she stated, only to be backhanded by Black Mask. "Shut it," he snapped. "Buczynski, grab her and take her with us." As Buczynski complied, Slade spoke up. "So, what exactly are you planning to do with her?" he asked, unable to contain his curiosity. "It's simple, Deathstroke. We're going to have a good old-fashioned witch-burning," Black Mask grinned cruelly. Back at Ivy's apartment, Izuku had just finished putting out the fires and reviving Ivy's plants as Harley finished explaining the situation. "So, Sionis is trying to lure me into a trap by taking Ivy, whom he's likely going to kill after he gets to me? Is that the situation?" he asked, while Frank listened in, concerned. "Pretty much. So, what are you going to do?" Harley asked. Izuku thought for a moment before responding. "Do you know where he operates from? Like, where his main base is?" he inquired. "Yeah, it's the old industrial district. He's been there ever since he teamed up with Shark and Scarface, so expect them as well," Harley warned. Just as he was about to hang up, she asked, "Do you want any help?" Izuku paused for a moment before replying, "No, this was an attack on me, a show of force. I'm going to show my face myself." He hung up and used the float fruit to fly toward the industrial district. Meanwhile, Harley relayed what she had learned to those gathered at the Iceberg Lounge, who were strategizing on how to deal with these threats once and for all. "So, the boy wants to handle things himself, good for him," Joker said, nodding in agreement. "Indeed, you can't get ahead in this business if you're constantly relying on others," Two-Face added. "True, but perhaps there is something we can do," Penguin suggested with a smirk, piquing everyone's interest. Izuku hovered above the industrial district, his expression serious as he surveyed the area, combining the powers of observation hockey, glare fruit, voice fruit, and rumble fruit to scan the entire district. He realized that Black Mask was smarter than he had initially thought. He and who Izuku guessed was the great white shark and Scarface were hidden in an inactive factory. Off to the side, he noticed a small military drone, likely belonging to the man who was watching along with the other notorious villains he had encountered. "Well, let's get started," he muttered to himself before extending both arms forward. "Meteor volcano," he thought as his arms transformed into magma. Several massive fists made of magma launched into the air, slamming into factories throughout the district and igniting them in huge ball of flames. While one might assume these attacks were random, they were not. Thanks to Izuku's multiple sensing abilities, he could identify which factories were empty yet close enough to instill fear in the enemy. Cries of panic erupted as the goons either tried to extinguish the fires or flee, while others rushed in to save whatever products and supplies they could. Izuku made his way toward where Ivy was being held, casually landing and walking right into the building, facing a wall of at least 50 armed men. "Hello, brat," Black Mask greeted with a smirk from a catwalk next to Poison Ivy, who was tied to a pole. "And goodbye." With a snap of his fingers, all the guns fired down at the young man. However, when the smoke cleared, Black Mask's smirk faded, and the goon's eyes widened in horror. Instead of blood, there was simply Machi putting Izuku back together. "Okay, my turn," he said as he finished recovering, placing his hand on the ground. Mass Machi Gatling. The ground began to shift, transforming into Machi that slammed the goons into the walls, encasing them in the sticky treat. Before anyone could react, Izuku channeled 5% of one for all and seemingly disappeared, only to reappear between Pamela and Roma. "What the?" Black Mask was cut off as Izuku's fist slammed into his mask, shattering it and sending him flying across the room. Izuku quickly ran over to Pamela. "So, did you have a good night with Harley?" he asked with a smirk. "Oh, it was an absolute blast," she replied sarcastically, though a small smile crept onto her face as he turned his fingers into blades and cut the ropes off. He then gently picked her up and floated them to the ground, just in time to encounter Scarface. "Well, look who's he!" The puppet was interrupted as its head exploded into pieces from a shotgun shell fired from Izuku's hand, which had transformed into a gun thanks to the arms fruit. The ventriloquist stared blankly at the remnants of his puppet. "Mr. Scarface," he muttered absent-mindedly. "Okay, I've seen enough," Shark snarled as he emerged from the back. "This is going on long enough, and it's time for me to—" He was cut off by sniffing noises, which was impressive since he didn't have a nose. "Does anyone else smell smoke?" he questioned, and indeed, the scent of fire filled the air. Izuku's eyes widened as he realized what had happened, grabbing Ivy and quickly flying out of the building. Boom! Izuku looked down in horror as the industrial district had turned into a sea of flames. How did the fires spread so quickly, he wondered. It couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes since he entered the building, and now the fire was raging. Poison Ivy, sensing his distress, tried to lighten the mood. "Well, if your goal was to send a message, I'd say mission accomplished," she chuckled lightly, relieved to see a small smile on his face as they landed on a rooftop a few miles away. As they landed, Izuku gently set Ivy down, and she took a few steps away from him. "Overall, I'd say that was horrible," she muttered before turning to him. "Look, this entire night is a mess, so let's just go home and get some sleep. I saw penguins drone when we were flying, but there's no way they could have seen everything. Since I don't want to answer all their questions alone, and I'm sure you're not up for traveling for a few days, let's deal with all that tomorrow." Ivy proposed, and Izuku nodded, opening an air door directly into Ivy's apartment. However, before they could step through, something flew through the air and embedded itself into the ground in front of them. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Ivy hissed, recognizing the weapon before turning to see the Dark Knight and his former protege, neither looking pleased. "The only place you two are going is to a cell at Arkham, and I'll make sure it's for good after that stunt you pulled in the industrial district," Batman growled, more angry than Ivy had ever heard him, not that she cared at the moment. "Are we seriously doing this now? You had to have seen Black Mask's broadcast, and yet you think we're in the wrong?" Ivy asked, her curiosity piqued as Batman's scowl deepened. "It doesn't matter, because of your actions, the city is in a panic due to the miles of fire now burning through it. I'll ensure this is the last time the two of you ever threaten Gotham or its citizens again," he promised, producing two dual-sided batarang-shaped blades while Nightwing activated his signature batons. Poison Ivy's patience finally ran out as a twitch appeared on her face. She raised her hands, causing plants from nearby windowsills and rooftop gardens to grow and circle them. "You know what? Fine, if you want to fight, then bring it on. I've got more than enough anger for the both of you. How about the four of us then?" Slade and Lester jumped down from a nearby rooftop. "I was wondering where those two went," Izuku commented idly as the two assassins stood with the two heroes, who watched them with distrust. "What do you want, Slade? I'm pretty. Sure you won't be getting a paycheck now, so why bother sticking around?" Batman asked, receiving only a smirk from the mercenary. "You see, that's exactly the problem. Black Mask insisted on paying once the job was done. That can't happen now for obvious reasons," Deathstroke revealed, glancing at Izuku. "However, it turns out our friend here has managed to acquire quite a price on his head despite being so green. I think part of it is because of the trouble he's caused for the two of you," Deathstroke said, earning a scowl from Nightwing. Before he could say anything, Batman intervened. "We take them alive, got it, Deathstroke?" he questioned, his expression serious. Deathstroke replied with a grin, "I got it. Besides, they pay more if you bring them in alive." As Buczynski activated his gauntlets, Nightwing muttered to himself, "I can't believe we're actually doing this." Before anyone could move, Izuku spoke up. "Deathstroke, you mentioned there was a bounty on my head, right?" After receiving a nod, he continued, "Is there one on Ivy's?" This time, Deathstroke shook his head. "I see," Izuku said, turning to Ivy. "Thanks for everything, Pamela. I'll be in touch." In an instant, Ivy was swept up in a gust of wind and disappeared through an air door that quickly closed behind her. "Now that that's taken care of, how about a quick matchup?" Izuku proposed. On your side, you've got the bat, he said, looking at Batman. The merc, he gestured to Slade. And the help, he added, glancing at Lester and D-, who looked annoyed by the label. And on this side, we have me, the rookie. Izuku smirked. Don't know about you, but I like my odds. Let's see how you like them when you're out. Lester shouted, charging forward with his gloves sparking as he prepared to punch. Smash! Lester received a powerful punch to the face, sending him flying until he crashed into a wall, a pool of blood forming around him. Next, Izuku said calmly as the other three rushed forward, attempting to coordinate their attack. Their years of experience allowed them to blend their fighting styles, but it was still ineffective against Izuku. His training and knowledge gave him the upper hand. Nightwing swung his batons, aiming for Izuku's legs, but Izuku countered with a swift kick, forcing D to dodge at the last second. Slade leaped over him, attempting an overhead strike, but a powerful punch from Izuku sent him gasping backward. Meanwhile, Batman had snuck up behind Izuku, ready to strike. Just as he was about to attack, two hands emerged from a bloom of flower petals and grabbed Batman's arms. To his shock, his bat blades began to rust and crumble. However, Nightwing noticed this and quickly jumped in with a kick, forcing the hands to disappear and allowing Batman to escape. Nightwing smirked, it's about time I actually landed a hit. But he quickly realized that Izuku hadn't moved an inch. Before he could react, Izuku grabbed his leg and pulled him down, aiming a powerful fist at his stomach. The impact sent Nightwing crashing through the roof and several floors of the building. Izuku observed Nightwing's prone form, reflecting on his theory about their multiverse. He thought, as long as we're in this multiverse, most things won't even be able to scratch you. I need to test a few things to see how they affect you. The Bat God within him agreed. Suddenly, he noticed Batman speaking. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? He asked, receiving an annoyed scowl from Batman. I asked why you're doing this. What's your endgame? Batman pressed. This question frustrated Izuku. Why am I doing this? We all have to eat. As for my endgame, I haven't really thought about it. I'm planning to leave the city soon to travel and meet people, help some criminals earn a dishonest buck, for a portion of the profits, of course. I'm thinking 25%. Sound good to you too? He asked, but Batman and Slade ignored him as Slade charged with his swords drawn. Boom! An explosion filled the air, and as the smoke cleared, Batman's eyes widened at the sight of an unconscious Deathstroke, his chest scorched and face badly burned. And then there was one. So what will you do, Bats? Fight me and risk leaving Gotham vulnerable, or let me go knowing you couldn't stop me? Izuku asked, extending his arms. Those are your choices, and frankly, it's an easy one. Batman gritted his teeth, realizing Izuku was right. He had no means to stop him, and fighting would be a waste of time. With one last glare, he jumped down to collect Nightwing and called for the Batwing to return to the Batcave. Once they were gone, Izuku sighed with relief, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. Thank goodness that's over, he said, shaking his head. I really need to get out of this city if things keep happening like this. I hate to break it to you, but it's like this everywhere, Deathstroke replied. Were you serious about that villain assistance idea? Izuku nodded. Yeah, I am. I figured it would be a great way to make a profit while building connections if my other plans don't work out. But first I need a ride, he said, pulling out his cell phone and selecting a contact. Hey, it's me. Look, I need a ride out of town. Got anything for me, calculator? Already done. I just finished watching your performance against the heroes, and I have a private plane waiting for you at Gotham National Airport. Head there at midnight and tell the pilot where you want to go, calculator instructed, causing Izuku to blink in confusion. You were watching? He asked, eliciting a laugh from the hacker. Indeed, and it wasn't just me. Penguin used his drone to live stream your little fight. I think the top number of viewers was around 10, criminals are thinking about hiring you, even with what you're charging, he informed, prompting a sigh from Izuku. At least he wouldn't have to worry about getting the word out. Thanks, calculator. I'll call you when I get there, he said before hanging up and searching for a place to lay low for a couple of hours. It was midnight when Izuku touched down on the runway, where a small jet awaited him. A lone pilot noticed Izuku approaching. Izuku Midoriya, the pilot asked, receiving a nod in response. Calculator told you you'd take me where I want to go, Izuku stated, and the pilot nodded. Indeed, sir. I'm ready whenever you are, the pilot replied, and Izuku instructed, we leave immediately. The pilot nodded and followed him into the plane. Yes, sir. And where exactly are we going? The pilot inquired as Izuku paused to look back. Central City. Around 4 a.m., the plane landed in Central City. Izuku left the airport, following Calculator's instructions to the safe house waiting for him. I feel like I could sleep for a week, he thought, having been unable to rest on the plane, unwilling to let his guard down until he reached his destination. Still, the thought of a bed sounds like paradise, he mused as he arrived at the small apartment complex that would serve as his safe house. After relaying the code Calculator provided to the receptionist, Izuku received a key and headed up to his room. It was a simple space with just a bed and a small bathroom, but to Izuku, it was perfect. Without hesitation, he laid down, blacking out before his head even hit the pillow. Izuku awoke with a groan as the sun shone brightly into his eyes. He sat up, annoyed to see it was only 7 a.m., and judging by the noise outside, it would be pointless trying to go back to sleep, he grumbled, attempting to smooth out the wrinkles in his clothes. Well, you know what they say, the early bird gets the kill. The Batman who laughed cackled in his mind, but Izuku tried to block him out, feeling a headache forming. Still, the spirit was right, Izuku was here for a reason, and the sooner he got started, the sooner he might be able to return home. However, before he could continue his thoughts, a notification on his phone caught his attention. It was a text from Poison Ivy, sent around 2 a.m. The message was short and simple, call me. Izuku sighed, massaging the bridge of his nose. It's too early for this, he thought as some spirits chuckled at his expense. Izuku dear, take my advice and call her. Trust me, you don't want to keep a lady waiting, Ragnio advised, prompting Izuku to grunt but nod. If she sent him a text that late, chances were she was still awake. Without further delay, he scrolled to her number and hit call. It rang twice before she answered. Well, it's about time, she said, thankfully sounding neither angry nor annoyed. So where did you end up? Central City. There's a lab here that has something that might be able to get me home, Izuku explained, receiving a hum from the plant lover. Is it likely to work? She asked, and Izuku responded with a grunt, causing her to sigh. Thought so. An awkward silence followed, and Izuku felt the need to clear the air. Look, Ivy, I'm sorry about what happened last night. From getting you captured to sending you away without giving you a chance to speak, I'm sorry for all of that. I didn't mean to make you worry, he apologized, and Ivy let out a snort. Don't get ahead of yourself, she countered. I was upset you chose to send me away without asking what I wanted, and I've been waiting for hours to yell at you. She probably would have continued if not for Frank's laughter coming through the phone. Girl, are you for real? Frank laughed, and it seemed he must have grabbed the phone because his voice was louder and clearer now. My man, the second her green self landed here, she made a beeline for that weird portal you made, only for it to close right in front of her. Since then, she's been trying to call anyone to find out what happened before finally sending you that text. She's been pacing back and forth ever since. Surprised she hasn't dug a moat yet, Frank laughed, only to cry out in surprise as Ivy's voice returned. Ignore the weed, Ivy told him, dismissing Frank's indignant squawk. Look, Izuku, I don't know what exactly you're planning, but I hope you know what you're doing. And no matter what happens, you've always got a place here. Izuku felt a small smile form. Thanks, Ivy, for everything, he replied, gratitude filling his voice. Back in Gotham, Ivy smiled as well. Good luck, was all she said before hanging up and lying down on her couch. Oh man, she groaned, rubbing her forehead. Her attention was drawn to Frank, who hummed. Quirking an eyebrow, she addressed him. You need something? No matter what happens, you've always got a place here, Frank repeated in a high-pitched voice, laughing again. That place would happen to be your bed, now would it? He teased, prompting Ivy to glare at him, her face flushed with embarrassment. You darn weed, she roared as she lunged at him, with Frank dodging and laughing. Come on, girl, admit it. The plants aren't the only ones thirsty. Back with Izuku, he had just stepped out of the shower and gotten dressed in simple sweats when he heard some noise coming from his window. Looking out, he saw a small group of people had formed, and standing in the center of it was none other than the Flash. Yup, good old Barry. The Batman who laughed remarked. Hey Red, has Barry been saying anything recently? He inquired, receiving a grumble from the Red Death. Ignoring the banter, Izuku narrowed his eyes at the man. He thought to himself that Barry didn't seem as powerful as the ones from the memories of the Dark Knights. Just makes this a bit easier, I guess, he mused, walking away before sitting on the bed. Alright, let's get to work. With that, he activated the hollow fruit, creating dozens of ghosts before using the fruit's astral projection to leave his body, allowing him to move freely throughout the city. Izuku and his ghosts turned invisible and left the building, their destination only a few blocks away. At Central City Labs, getting in was child's play, as was learning the layout of the lab and locating what he was searching for. Just a few minutes after arriving, he found it sealed off in a deserted room, the cosmic treadmill. The treadmill was located in the middle of a large circular room with one way in and out, and a control monitor a few feet away against the wall. Well, what do you think? Is it similar enough that you could walk me through working it? He questioned, getting a nod from the killing machine and Red Death. Indeed, most treadmills are the same, but it's best we make sure. After we do this, Flash is bound to move it somewhere more secure, and finding it again could prove quite a challenge, Killing Machine warned, with Izuku nodding in agreement. I know, we're already putting a massive target on our backs just by pulling this little stunt, Izuku thought as he and the rest of the ghosts, while still invisible, left the building, moving back to the safe house. He re-entered his body as the ghosts disappeared. Blinking back awake, Izuku stood up and stretched his muscles before looking at his phone. Not even half an hour, huh, he thought while scratching the back of his head. It was decided pretty quickly that the plan needed to be executed at night, the lab would be nearly empty, and the Flash was usually busier at night. True, it would probably only buy a few more seconds, but he would take what he could get. Guess I have some time to kill, Izuku thought, looking back out the window and noticing the crowd was gone along with the Flash. He did, however, see two men dressed in costumes walking into a restaurant. Oh, that place. Flash once told me that was a popular spot for villains to eat and drink, Red Death reminisced almost fondly. Just then, Izuku's stomach roared to life, reminding him how long it had been since he last ate. Well, he thought, looking out the window, I do have some time to kill. A couple of minutes later, Izuku entered the diner. As he walked in, the place went silent, customers and staff stared at him with various amounts of fear and worry. As he made his way to the bar, the noise picked up as everyone talked in hushed tones, though Izuku was able to hear them perfectly. Hey, is that who I think it is? One whispered. Sure is. What the hell is he doing here anyway? Wasn't he fighting the Bat last night? Another replied. Sure was. You think he's going after the Flash next? Someone else speculated. Hope so. I wonder if he could use some help, another voice chimed in. Izuku ignored the murmurs and sat down at the bar, where the waitress quickly approached to take his order. I'll take a burger and sweet tea, please, he requested, and the woman nodded before walking off. Three figures approached from behind him. You know, I don't know many blokes here that would say please, an accented voice said, not mockingly but more in a teasing manner. Izuku turned to see the three figures, Mirror Master, Captain Cold, and Captain Boomerang, three of the Flash's most infamous villains. Can I help you three with something? He asked, and the three nodded before taking seats at the bar, with Boomerang on his left, Mirror Master on his right, and Cold next to Mirror. You are Izuku Midoriya, correct? The new mercenary who helps those of our kind make a living for the right price? Mirror Master asked, and Izuku nodded. Greetings, I am. I know who you are. Now, what do you want? Izuku interrupted, causing Mirror Master to scowl while the two captains chuckled. Well mate, me and the boys here are planning something big for tomorrow, and we were thinking you might want in on it, Boomerang spoke up, with Cold nodding in agreement. Yes, if we could pull this off, it could make us all millions, the Ice Master informed, raising an eyebrow from Izuku. And you're just going to talk about it out in the open? The teen asked, already noticing several patrons taking peeks at their table as the waitress brought over Izuku's order. Here at midnight then, Mirror Master offered, and Izuku slowly nodded. I have business tonight, but it should be over by then. If I'm interested, I'll stop by, Izuku told them, biting into the burger as the three men nodded and got up. Very well, then I hope to see you tonight, Mirror Master said as the three men left, leaving Izuku alone to enjoy his meal and prepare for the mission ahead. It was time for Izuku to put his plan into action, now clad in his hero costume or former hero, depending on how one looked at it. Let's go, he thought before activating the clear fruit, the con fruit, and the through fruit so he could get through the building and into the room undetected. Okay, the Flash is currently busy with the trickster, so I should have a few minutes, Izuku thought, going over to the console and using the memories of the spirits to deactivate the security in the room while turning on the treadmill. Good, now quickly, there isn't much time. Red Death urged, and Izuku nodded before creating two clones to man the console while the original activated the Flash fruit, hopped on the treadmill, and started to run. The plan was rather simple. By using the treadmill, Izuku hoped to look onto his own multiverse before finding his own world and traveling back there. The problem was that Izuku had to search through every multiverse connected to him, and with the devil fruit spirits, he was linked to countless realities. All he could do was cycle through them until he found his own. Just 2 minutes later, after cycling through hundreds of multiverses, the power went out. Frustrated, Izuku scowled as he sensed something approaching quickly before the door was knocked down. You know, if you wanted to get some exercise, the Flash said as he stepped into the room, two cameras following him. There are easier ways to do it. His eyes widened as the lights came back on and he recognized Izuku. Hey, wait, aren't you? He didn't finish his thought as Izuku snapped his fingers, causing Flash to suddenly be covered in cuts, his costume torn and blood visible. This was Izuku's wind knives, a technique using the wind fruit to send out thousands of tiny blades made of wind toward his opponent. Flash gripped one of his wounds, trying to understand what had happened when both of Izuku's clones slammed into him, their fists coated in diamonds. He was knocked back through the walls. Groaning, Flash looked up to see Izuku standing above him. Nothing personal, Izuku muttered before bringing down his fist, knocking Flash unconscious, and then destroying the cameras with a bolt of lightning. Well, that's that, a spirit said, their voice sounding ancient and bored. Izuku could almost feel their indifference before they shifted to a more jovial tone. Since this whole thing is a bust, let's just skedaddle, they suggested. Izuku felt his eyebrow twitch. Shut it, Zeus, he ordered, following the voice's suggestion while listening to it grumble about kids needing to resemble their elders. Someone get this glorious BSTRD a drink, was the first thing Izuku heard upon entering the diner, where applause and cheers erupted. He looked around to see several villains and thugs celebrating, food and drink in hand, as the short fight with Flash played on loop on the TV. At least I know why they're celebrating, he noted before Captain Boomerang shoved a beer mug into his hands. Cheers, mate. Boomerang called, clinking his mug against Izuku's before chugging it down. Izuku hesitated for a moment before shrugging and joining in, earning another cheer from the others. Good on you, mate. Boomerang laughed at the slight disgust on Izuku's face. What's wrong? Drink not to your liking, he asked, and Izuku shook his head. Not a fan of alcohol in general. What little I've had, overprotective mother and all that, he explained, getting a nod from Boomerang. Understandable, he grunted. Besides, thanks to a few of my powers, I can't even get buzzed, so all I'm left with is basically some bitter water. Some of the heavier drinkers bowed their heads in mourning, Boomerang among them, looking close to tears. Ah mate, that's just. I can't even imagine, he said, looking close to breaking down. Luckily, Captain Cold and Mirror Master came from the back room. If you two are quite done, I believe we have business to discuss, Mirror Master said as Izuku and Boomerang approached. So, are you interested in hearing us out? Mirror Master asked, and Izuku nodded, allowing the man to move aside and let him into the back room. Hey, Merc, Cold suddenly asked, getting Izuku's attention. Why didn't you finish him, he inquired, and the room fell silent. The flash you had him dead to rights. Why not kill him? Cold asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. Most patrons moved toward their weapons, except for Boomerang. Idiots, Izuku thought, rolling his eyes. Izuku crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. Do you really think I would place that kind of target on my back without getting paid for it? He asked, his voice mocking, earning chuckles and relieved smiles from the criminals. Even Cold cracked a smirk. Genius, Mirror Master said dryly before gesturing to the inside of the room. Now, if you're done screwing around, we have an operation to plan. He led the four men into the room, with Cold closing the door behind him. The room was basic, with a single overhead light and supplies scattered around. The only notable item was a scale model of Central City. Now then, let's get started, Mirror Master said, walking over to the model and pointing at what looked like an armored train. At 11:45 tomorrow morning, an armored train will depart Central City Station and make its way to a secure military drop-off point. The cargo on this train will contain everything the criminals of Central City have stolen or attempted to steal for the last 6 months, as well as the equipment used in their operations. And don't even ask why they do this in the first place, because we don't have the faintest clue either, Boomerang scoffed, receiving a dry look from Mirror Master. In any case, the plan is simple. We need to disguise ourselves as some of the guards, dispose of the rest, and divert the train to our meet-up location with one of Calculator's contacts, who will take the merchandise and deposit it into our accounts, Mirror Master explained. The biggest challenge would have been the Flash, Cold added with a smirk. But something tells me he won't be a problem tomorrow. Mirror Master and Boomerang shared matching smirks while Izuku fought back a scowl. So why do you need me if I took care of the biggest obstacle? He asked, trying to understand his role. Insurance, came the answer from Cold. By now, everyone in the country has seen what you did to the speedster and has already gotten him to a hospital. He's probably already asked someone to watch over the train tomorrow. We just want you there in case we need extra muscle. Cold explained, with Izuku considering it. Just do it, boy. It's not like we have any other options at the moment, and if we are stuck here for good, this would be a great way to build a reputation, Zeus chimed in, his spirit materializing next to Izuku. This was Zeus, spirit of the human fruit model Zeus. Izuku narrowed his eyes. You're being awfully chatty today, old man, he remarked, noticing the former god's unusual demeanor. Zeus laughed. What can I say? I'm feeling positively energized, he revealed, his voice taking on a more intense tone for a moment before returning to his usual self. So use me in your next fight, and if you don't, I'll hound you until you do, he said before disappearing, leaving Izuku to grunt in response. Well, Mr. Midoriya, what do you say? Mirror Master asked, giving Izuku a moment to think. With a sigh, Izuku nodded, giving his consent, which earned him a nod from Mirror Master and satisfied smirks from Captain Cold and Boomerang. Excellent. Now, as for how we'll get rid of the guards, we simply need to, the mirror manipulator began, but Izuku interrupted. Actually, I've got an idea on how to do it quickly and quietly, the green-haired boy revealed, garnering looks of interest from the others. Oh, and just how will you do that? Captain Cold asked, and a smirk appeared on Izuku's face. I'll answer that in a moment, but first, I need you three to answer my question. He paused, and the three leaned in with slight anticipation. How quickly can you three get gas masks? You sure this is going to work, mate? Izuku sighed, hearing the question once again. It was 11:30 in the morning, and the three were already disguised and waiting outside the train station. Yes, Boomerang, I'm sure, Izuku replied, finishing the last of his preparations just as Cold spotted something approaching the station. They're here, he muttered, seeing 4 armored cars arriving and stopping outside the station. 4 groups of 5 quickly piled out, and the one in charge approached them. And just who are you 4? He asked, eyeing them suspiciously. Izuku wondered how they weren't recognized on sight. Backup squad, Mirror Master said, acting as the leader. With the Flash in the hospital, the government wanted a little extra security on this mission. We were all that was available at the time. The man scrutinized the 4 before snorting. I can see why, he muttered before ordering everyone into the station and onto the train. The 4 were placed in the middle car and were thankfully left alone. Right on schedule, the train started to move. Right, Midoriya, begin, Mirror Master ordered as he, Captain Cold, and Captain Boomerang put on their gas masks. Izuku created 4 clones. The train had 6 cars, so Izuku and his clones split up. Using the combination of the clear fruit, com fruit, and the through fruit, they moved to the other cars, with the clones heading to the holding cars where the merchandise was, while Izuku went to the conductor's cabin and used the gas fruit to incapacitate them. After this, the 4 clones dragged the unconscious guards to the back car before helping the other 3 criminals move everything from the last car into the other. 4. Alright, that's the last of it, Boomerang announced, wiping sweat from his brow. It took about half an hour of work, but they finally did it. We're reaching the turn-off, Izuku announced over the intercom, having stayed in the conductor's car in case something happened. I'm about to change tracks. Cut the last car off soon, he warned as Cold stepped forward and shot a blast of ice from his cold gun, freezing the connecting cable and causing it to snap, disconnecting the soldier's car from the rest of the train as Izuku shifted the tracks, letting the train move down the track they needed. And that's how it's done, boys. Boomerang cheered, ready to celebrate early when Izuku's voice came over the intercom. We've got a problem. Come up to the conductor's car quick, he instructed, and the 3 exchanged worried glances before rushing to the front car, noticing it was slowly coming to a stop as they reached the front. What's wrong? Why are we stopping? Mirror Master demanded, only to see someone flying a few feet in front of the train. Shazam, Izuku thought, narrowing his eyes as he heard Zeus cackling in anticipation. What do we do now? Boomerang grumbled, trying to think of a plan before noticing Izuku heading towards the door. And where are you going, mate? He asked, but Izuku paused long enough to say, my job, before exiting the car and climbing to the roof, where he was spotted by the hero. There you are, evildoer. Are you going to surrender now or face my wrath? The hero asked confidently, hands on his hips. Izuku sighed and took off his helmet, letting Shazam see who he was. You? The hero asked. Me, Izuku replied simply as a sky-blue energy surrounded him, activating Zeus's fruit. Seeing this, Shazam sighed. Fine then, criminal, have it your way. Shazam finished, but his words turned into a scream as Izuku suddenly appeared directly in front of him and delivered a powerful kick, sending him hurtling through the air with Izuku chasing after him. Seeing this, Boomerang couldn't help but whistle. Kid's just full of surprises, isn't he? Cold nodded while Mirror Master hummed. Regardless, he's doing his job, so let's do ours, he ordered, taking control of the train and moving it toward the meetup point. Izuku quickly met up with Shazam, who had composed himself. "That was a dirty trick, villain," the hero said, glaring while rubbing the spot where he had been struck. However, a small look of pity crossed his face as he continued, "It saddens me to see someone so young go down such a dark path." At that moment, Izuku felt a surge of anger. After everything he had been through recently, he didn't want to hear that, especially from Shazam. With a sneer, he retorted, "That's rich coming from you, of all people, Billy." Shazam's eyes widened in fear as he stammered, "How do you," but was cut off when Izuku struck him again, delivering a flurry of punches to his face. He followed up with a powerful kick to Shazam's stomach, sending him flying. Izuku caught him by the back of the head and slammed it multiple times into his leg, each strike infused with hockey. A news helicopter arrived, keeping its distance while broadcasting live. Izuku was oblivious to the commentary, his focus solely on Shazam, who emerged from the building, electricity crackling around him. "So that's the power of Zeus from this universe," Zeus commented, scoffing. "Pathetic. Izuku, show him what it means to truly wield the power of the King of Olympus." As lightning began to emit from Izuku, covering his arms and legs, Shazam's eyes widened in shock and fear before narrowing in determination. He launched himself at Izuku, landing a punch to his face. Izuku didn't even flinch. Disbelief crossed Shazam's face as Izuku cracked his neck. "My turn." Moments later, Izuku drove his fist into Shazam's gut, causing the hero to scream in pain as the electricity coursed through him. Izuku unleashed a series of attacks, each one landing with precision, while Shazam struggled to fight back, barely managing to land a hit that had little effect. By the end of the confrontation, Shazam hovered in the air, barely conscious, desperately trying to maintain his superhero form. Seeing this, Izuku turned to leave, the energy around him dissipating as he deactivated the power. Zeus's joyful laughter echoed in his mind, satisfied with the outcome. "Why?" Shazam managed to ask weakly, glaring at Izuku. "Why are you doing all this?" "Just put on a good show," the Batman who laughs chimed in. "It's gotten us this far, and the whole country is watching right now, so let's just keep it going." Izuku had to admit this was the best option at that moment. "Why am I doing this?" "That's simple, it's all part of my preparations," Izuku replied, watching as Shazam's eyes widened. "Preparations? Just what the hell are you planning?" Shazam demanded, but Izuku simply looked back and uttered two words that would change everything. "My revolution." With that, he flew off, unaware of the chain of events he had just set in motion. Had Izuku known the consequences of those words, he might have chosen differently. But it was too late, the hands of fate were already in motion. As Izuku soared away, he remained oblivious to the powers beginning to stir, preparing for what was to come. No matter who would ultimately prevail, everyone would agree on one thing: this was the day everything began to change.